In September of 1938, 3 months after Superman turned the comic book into a growth industry, a 22-year-old artist put a man in a crimson hood on a page and handed him a longbow. No super strength. No flight. No powers of any kind, just a bow, and an unreasonable amount of confidence. He was called the Arrow, and he was the first superhero in American comics built around archery. Green Arrow would not exist for another 3 years. Batman did not exist yet at all. And today, if you asked 100 comic readers to name him, you would be lucky to get one. This is what happened to him, and to the doomed little company that published him, a company whose employees went on to invent half of Marvel. This is the cover. Funny Pages, September 1938, 10 cents. Look at it. A truant officer chasing a boy who has skipped school to go fishing. Bright yellow logo, a rabbit, a signpost reading schoolhouse. It is, by every visual signal, a humor comic for small children, which is precisely what the title promises. Fun for the entire family. There is nothing on this cover to tell you that inside it, buried in the back among the gag strips, American comics were about to acquire an entire archetype. To understand why, you have to appreciate how recent everything was. In June of 1938, Action Comics #1 had gone on sale with Superman on the cover, and it sold in a way that rewrote the economics of the entire business overnight. Before that, comic books were mostly reprints of newspaper strips, cheap packages of material that had already run somewhere else. The costumed superhero did not exist as a category. There was no genre. There was one character, and a great deal of very fast arithmetic being done in publishers' offices about how to get another. One of those offices belonged to Centaur Publications, and Centaur is one of the most important companies almost nobody talks about. It was assembled, in effect, out of the wreckage of 2 previous failures. The Comics Magazine Company had been founded in 1936 by John Mahone and Bill Cook. In September 1937, it was bought out by Ultim Publications. And by January 1938, Ultim itself was bought out by 3 men, Joe Hardy, Fred Gardner and Raymond Kelly, operating as Centaur Publications, Incorporated. Centaur began publishing in March of 1938, 3 months before Superman appeared. So this was a company that had inherited a catalog, a printing arrangement and a stable of freelancers, and that found itself, entirely by accident, holding all the equipment required to chase a gold rush at the exact moment the gold rush started. What it did not inherit was distribution. Remember that. It is the thing that eventually kills them, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the quality of what they published. And that inherited catalog was not nothing. Back in November 1936, in the Comics Magazine Company days, a creator named George Brenner had introduced a character called the Clock, a man in a dinner jacket and a featureless dark mask, who left a calling card bearing a clock face. The Clock is generally credited as the first masked hero in American comic books. He predates Superman by a year and a half. So the corporate line that became Centaur had already, quietly, done something historic before anyone knew there was a genre to be historic in. Which brings us to September 1938, and to Funny Pages number 21, numbered, in the confusing way these things were, as Volume 2, number 10. Inside it, the Arrow. Created and drawn by Paul Gustafson. He wears a full crimson bodysuit and a hood that covers his entire head, leaving only his eyes. He carries a longbow and a quiver. He does not have an origin story in the modern sense. He does not have a secret identity the reader is let in on. He simply arrives, fully formed, and starts shooting. Look at the costume, because in 1938 this is a genuinely radical piece of design. Superman had the trunks and cape. Most of the early imitators were men in suits with a domino mask, or aviators, or explorers. The Arrow is covered head to foot in a single flat color, faceless, silhouetted. It is closer to how superheroes would look a decade later than to anything else on the rack that autumn. Gustafson understood immediately that the costume was not a disguise. It was a logo. And the first story is smarter than it has any business being. It opens in a police station, and the Arrow is not in it. Detectives are working over a suspect named Dylan, trying to make him talk. "You'd better talk, Dylan, or we'll keep you here until you do." He says nothing. The chief is losing patience. 6 panels in, our hero has not appeared, has not been mentioned, and has no origin. The reader is simply dropped into a city where he already operates. Then an arrow comes through the office window. Pinned to it is a note. "Release Dylan at once. He is not the man you want. Do not follow him. I will take care of the rest." The arrow. And here is the line that tells you everything about how this character was conceived. The chief reads it and says, "All right, let Dylan go. I'll take the word of the arrow any day, he's never been wrong yet." He is introduced as an institution. A man the police already defer to, whose handwriting they already recognize, with a reputation that predates his first appearance. And then Gustafson does something I genuinely did not expect from a 6-page strip in 1938. The note is a fake. The gang forged it, a phony arrow and note, as one of them puts it, to get their man walked out of a police station. Cut to a spacious home, where a man lowers a newspaper and says, "Fools. You'd think they knew my handwriting and arrows by now. The real arrow has just read about himself doing something he did not do." The hero's own signature gimmick is used against him in the very first story that establishes it. So he goes and finds them. A lone figure outside a shack in the dark, bow already drawn, in a full red suit and hood. He strikes. Panic inside, he's here, the arrow. And he leaves them exactly what he is owed, another note, another arrow, reading, "I'll get every last one of you for what you've done." The arrow. It is a tight, well-constructed little revenge story with a twist in the middle, built entirely around one weapon and one piece of stationery. That is the whole character, fully worked out, on day one. That trick, the arrow as a delivery system for a message, is the piece of him that survived, even though his name did not. Warnings pinned to walls. Notes fired through windows to the police. It turns the weapon into a signature and a communication system at once, the hero announcing himself in the same motion that he acts. Nearly every Archer character since has some version of it. It starts here, in the back of a children's humor anthology, in September 1938. So the claim, stated carefully. The arrow is remembered, where he is remembered at all, as the first American superhero to rely on archery as his primary gimmick. He was also the first superhero Centaur published. And the timing is the part that should stop you. September 1938 is 3 months after Action Comics #1. This character is not a copy of a trend. He is part of the first wave that created the trend, and he is arguably the first genuinely new superhero idea after Superman himself. The man who made him was 22. He was born Karl Paul Gustafson on the 16th of August, 1916, in Åland, the Swedish-speaking island province of Finland, out in the Baltic. His family emigrated to the United States when he was 5. He grew up in New York City and went to school there. And at an age when most people are still working out what they are for, he was drawing professionally in the chaotic new comic book trade, working through Harry Chesler's studio, one of the packaging shops that supplied finished pages to publishers who had none of their own staff. The arrow settled in and ran. He kept appearing in funny pages, month after month, all the way through to issue 42 in October 1940. 2 full years as a running feature is a considerable life for a Golden Age character. The newsstands of that period are a graveyard of heroes who lasted 3 appearances and were never drawn again. He was, by the modest standards of a small publisher with distribution problems, a success. Eventually he acquired the things the early strips had skipped. Under later hands, including the artist Bob Lubbers, the arrow was finally given a name and a life behind the hood. He was Ralph Payne, an agent of military intelligence. Which is a neat, economical explanation for how a man with no powers keeps ending up in the middle of international conspiracies, and it fits the mood of 1940, with the war in Europe already a year old and American comics increasingly preoccupied with spies and saboteurs. In October 1940 he got the thing every feature character was aiming at, his own title. The Arrow, 3 issues, running from October 1940 to October 1941. In the economy of Golden Age comics, a solo book is the promotion. It means the publisher believes the name alone will move copies. For a character with no powers, from a small company, 3 years before the Archer archetype became a fixture, that is a real achievement. It is also, as it turns out, the top of his arc. Because while the arrow was running, something else was happening at Centaur that would matter far more to the history of comics than the arrow himself. The company had become, without intending to, a training ground. Look at who was working there. Bill Everett, who created Amazing Man for Centaur, a hero raised by Tibetan monks who could turn himself into green vapor. Everett's first nationally published comics work was a Centaur cover, Amazing Mystery Funnies No. 1, in 1938. Karl Burgos was there too, working across Centaur's line. And Paul Gustafson, of course. 3 young men, all doing anonymous piecework for an underfunded publisher in the outer suburbs of the industry. Within about a year, all 3 of them would create characters for a brand new company being run by a pulp publisher named Martin Goodman. That company was Timely Comics. Timely became Atlas. Atlas became Marvel. Bill Everett created the Submariner. Karl Burgos created the Human Torch. And Paul Gustafson created the Angel, which appeared in the first comic book Timely ever published, in October 1939, the issue that also contained the Torch and the Submariner. Marvel Comics, as a company, effectively begins with 3 features by 3 men who had all been drawing for Centaur. The Arrow's creator was one of them. Centaur, meanwhile, got nothing out of it at all. That is the tragedy of this company in one line. Centaur had the talent. It had, arguably, the deepest bench of any publisher of its size in 1939. What it did not have was a way of reliably getting its comics onto racks across the country. Distribution in this period was everything. It decided which titles a wholesaler bothered to place, which regions saw a book at all, and therefore which characters got the repeat exposure that turns a feature into a franchise. Centaur was, by every account, badly served on that front. By the end of 1940, Centaur Publications, Incorporated, had stopped production, and the operation limped on under a different name, the Comic Corporation of America. In 1942, it stopped publishing altogether. For years, start to finish. The company that had inherited the first masked hero in American comics, that had employed the men who would build Marvel's founding lineup, that had published the first Archer superhero, folded, primarily because of poor distribution, at the precise moment the industry it helped create was becoming enormous. And here is the timing that turns this from a business story into a genuinely painful one. On the 19th of September, 1941, while the Arrow's own title was still limping to its 3rd and final issue, DC put More Fun Comics No. 73 on sale. Cover dated November. Created by Mort Weisinger, designed by George Papp. Inside it, 2 debuts, Aquaman, and a costumed archer who fires trick arrows from a bow and leaves messages for the police. Green Arrow. I want to be careful here, because it is easy and lazy to shout theft. There is no evidence Weisinger was copying the Arrow. The acknowledged influences on Green Arrow are Robin Hood and a 1940 movie serial called The Green Archer. Archery heroes were in the air. The point is not plagiarism. The point is infrastructure. 2 Archer heroes, 3 years apart. One arrived at a company with national distribution, a marketing operation and a future. The other arrived at a company that would be dead within months. That difference, not quality, not originality, not who was first, is what decided which one you have heard of. Gustafson, at least, landed on his feet. He moved through the industry the way the good freelancers did, Funnies Incorporated, then Quality Comics. In 1940 he created Magno the Magnetic Man for Smash Comics, and the Spider for Crack Comics. And in August 1941 he created the Human Bomb, in Police Comics No. 1. That issue is worth noting for a reason that connects 2 of our stories. Police Comics No. 1 is also where Jack Cole launched Plastic Man. The artist who defined Silver Streak and the artist who invented the Arrow both have a character in the same comic. That is a remarkable list for a man who was still in his 20s for most of it. The Arrow. Phantom of the Fair, a hero who lived beneath the New York World's Fair, which is one of the great forgotten premises of the era. The Angel. Magno. The Spider. The Human Bomb. Gustafson was one of the most productive character creators of the entire Golden Age, and there is no statue of him anywhere, and until recently there was barely a decent account of his life. And then, in the late 1950s, he left. Not to another publisher, out of the industry entirely. Paul Gustafson became a surveyor and a civil engineer for the state of New York, and that is what he did for the rest of his working life. He died on the 29th of April, 1977. He had invented an entire superhero archetype before he was old enough to rent a car, and he finished his career measuring land for a state government. Comics did that to a great many of its founders. As for the Arrow, when Centaur went under, its copyrights went with it. There was no successor company to renew them, no archive, no rights department, nobody with any reason to keep the paperwork alive. So the Arrow, along with almost the entire Centaur catalog, lapsed into the public domain. By 1992 that was settled enough that Malibu Comics could revive the Centaur heroes wholesale, as a team called the Protectors, with the Arrow rebuilt under a new civilian name. Which leaves him in the odd condition that public domain creates. Anyone may publish the Arrow tomorrow. No permission, no license, no fee. And because anyone may, almost nobody does, there is no company with a reason to spend money establishing a character it cannot own exclusively. Public domain is not really freedom for a character. It is closer to being unclaimed property, available to everyone, therefore the responsibility of no one, and quietly overgrown. There is a lesson in this that goes well beyond comics. We tell the history of any medium as a history of firsts, as though being first is what secures a place. It very rarely is. The Arrow was first by 3 years and it bought him nothing, because he was first at the wrong company, in the wrong distribution network, at a moment when the wrong company was about to run out of money. Priority is a fact. Survival is a business arrangement. The two have far less to do with each other than we like to pretend. So, The Ledger. First Archer superhero in American comics, September 1938. 2 years as a running feature, then 3 issues of his own. Beaten into the ground not by a better character but by a better distributor. Created by a 22-year-old Finnish immigrant who would go on to create the Angel, the Spider, Magno and the Human Bomb, and who ended his career surveying land upstate. Published by a company that trained the founders of Marvel and could not stay in business for 5 years. Go back to that cover one more time. The truant officer, the boy with the fishing rod, the rabbit, the schoolhouse sign. Fun for the entire family, 10 cents, September 1938. Nothing about it announces that a piece of the permanent vocabulary of the superhero is sitting in the back of it. That is usually how it works. The important thing is almost never on the cover, and the people making it almost never know. Every comic shown here is in the public domain, and Centaur's line, Funny Pages, Amazing Man, Keen Detective Funnies, is sitting on the Internet Archive, free and legal to read. Go and find the Arrow's first appearance and look at what a 22-year-old did with 6 pages in 1938. If you want more of the heroes who got there first and were forgotten anyway, subscribe. There are a great many of them, and somebody ought to say their names out loud.